Well, welcome to the Beyond Cinema Studio presented by Celebs.com up here at Sundance. Freddy, having Shoals here, it's your first film, right?
Yes, it is.
So, I mean, for you as a filmmaker to kind of hit one out of the park from day one and land yourself in Sundance must be an extremely gratifying feeling.
It is. It's a great feeling, for sure.
And like when you were taking this journey, like, did you get to, like, so who was it first that made you think, okay, Shoals, you know, when did you discover it first as an individual before a project?
Good question, because people ask me how did it come to the story, and I'll tell you that. But I mean, the concept of Shoals I knew of from my love of doing Allman and the Allman Brothers, and then Skinner, and then Clarence Carter. But I was helping my best friend, childhood friend, move from the East Coast to New Mexico, and he needed help moving his car, so we took the southern route and took back roads, and no GPS, just a map, and so we would drive till late at night till we get tired, and then we'd look for a place to pull over. And so one night we pulled over and we saw Tupelo, Mississippi ahead of us and Shoals behind us, and we turned around and drove backwards and drove to Shoals, and we spent the next day there just blown away by the town and the vibe of the town. And we, during that next day while we were still there on the banks of the river, that's when we had the idea, like, wow, this is an incredible tale. I can't believe it hasn't been told, and we should tell this story.
Well, that's, I think, the incredible thing for me is I consider myself a music fan. I consider myself a fan of this sort of music that came out of Shoals, and yet it seems like this was all some sort of hidden secret.
Yeah.
The fact that the Swampers were a group of white guys playing in background to all these tracks of Aretha Franklin and Etta James, and it just seems like no one has really brought it to the fore.
I know.
Why do you think that is? Is it because it was hidden in Alabama, or like?
I mean, it's part of its mystique, I guess, along with the rest. I mean, I know people had tried to go down there and sort of tell the story, and it had just they had never come to fruition, any of those projects. And so obviously that felt, we felt lucky that we were able to, to tell the story. But the fact that we have the birthplace of Southern rock, essentially, and the Queen of Soul goes there to become the queen, and the R&B and soul and rock and roll all coming out of there. It's mind blowing. Plus, Sam Phillips and W.C. Handy being from there.
And it kind of feels like Aretha Franklin wouldn't be the Aretha Franklin we know today had it not been for that.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you listen to her on CBS, and before she went to Shoals and after, it was a game changer.
So in terms of getting all these amazing people, obviously it opens with Bono, but you're talking to Keith Richards and people like that, like people who other people would die to meet, like literally they would sacrifice themselves to meet these people.
Right. I probably would have as well.
Was it part? Yeah, I was going to say, did you meet a lot of like kind of heroes and legends that you probably wouldn't have thought you would get that chance?
Well, it just happened that a lot of that music I loved and grew up on. So yeah, and I was a music lover and musician, amateur musician, and so the fact that they were also the part of the Shoals history was just gravy, and to get to meet them and talk to them about their experiences was just awesome.
Did any of them was it hard to get in touch with them and get time with them? Was it easy once you dropped the name?
It's all those folks are super busy and travel the world, and so it's not the easiest thing. But but what ended up happening was the story. It was such a great story, and they wanted to be a part of servicing that story, and the musicians who came before them, and sort of the roots of a lot of the music they play and love. So the story, I think, is what got them to partake, and so glad they did, because they enriched the film.
Absolutely. I mean, Keith Richards saying that if he'd been allowed back in the country, he would have recorded much more there.
Yeah,
it's obviously an awesome moment.
Totally. He loves Shoals and has a special place for Shoals, in his heart, and you could tell that from the interview. And he was really excited to talk to us.
What I totally dig about the film that you don't often get from first-time kind of filmmakers in this setting is that you've managed to include not only the story of the studio or the label of Fame, but you've got the context of the time, Alabama, and the history of what was going on there. The personal story about the guy of Rick, the guy behind the thing, and you've managed to kind of get them all in without it feeling like it still has this kind of beautiful silences to it. Was that, like, for you, was that part of the struggle or the challenge of the movie?
Yeah, that's very, very insightful. Yeah, that was a very challenging thing to pull that off and feel like the movie was a whole, and it took you on a journey that was an arc that didn't feel like a bunch of sort of tangential stories that weren't connected. And so tying that all together, yet I wanted to tell all those things because I think all of those are an important part of it. But it becomes more and more challenging to keep your sort of cohesive sort of arc to the film, and so that was something that was a challenge, and it was. But I'm glad glad it was a challenge, and we.
How much footage did you have?
We shot a lot of footage. We'd go down there. There's skeleton, B-roll trips just to do a lot of B-roll, and so we would do that, and then obviously we shot a lot of interviews as well.
Anything that it killed you to leave out?
So there was so much to leave out that.
Anything particular that was like right on the cutting
Yeah,
edge?
two things that come to mind is a great story of Aretha with "Call Me." That was a beautiful story, and I cut a sequence to a song I love, "Simple Man," which Skinner did cut their first version there, which I always thought was very emblematic of the story of Muscle Shoals and was in the film at a certain point. But the film, you can make this a 12-hour film and leave stuff out. So those were hard choices, but those two in particular, I think about those sequences because I shot both of them and we put them together, and I loved those sequences, and they didn't make it in the film.
Did you, shooting in Alabama, were you given kind of open access? Are people still a little cagey about being on film and opening up and telling their story? Because you don't really think of it as being kind of this, let's all open up and share our feelings kind of place.
Totally, that's another good question. Yes, this is the first documentary obviously I've ever done, but I think that's a process. You start to get to know the folks down there, and you build a relationship. And in the beginning, people were much more closed off, and slowly you start to build that trust and relationship, and we were lucky enough that happened for us. And in that process, then you get once you can build that trust, you get more. They trust you more to reveal things that are personal or that they wouldn't want to necessarily share.
Yeah.
So.
And in terms of just the logistics of shooting in Alabama, was that ever an issue? Did you contact local commissions or anything?
Yeah, it was definitely in the beginning. Figuring out sort of best, where to get sound out of, where to get equipment, different things like that. Sort of, then we sort of got it down after a while. But yeah, it was definitely, had to figure that sort of workflow out.
And in terms of Rick, it's so much his story, and you had to have, so much of a trust and responsibility relationship with him. Have you shown him the film? Did you show him a cut?
No, he has not seen the film, and we were so close. And I just finished the film, and so, Rick, I love Rick, and we have a great relationship. And I'm thrilled for him to see the film. And I've talked to him at length about the film, and plus he was obviously there for all the on-camera stuff. But at this point, we're so close to the premiere. I want to see it on the big screen with the surround sound and really get the full experience of it.
It'd be really cool to watch him. Obviously, Dave Grohl's got Sound City up here. I know a couple of guys in LA who kind of had these amazing old boards that people used to come to because they had these legends and myths around them. Is this stuff disappearing now that everything is so digitally inclined? I think,
I think it is, but I think that there'll be a resurgence. I think it'll live on, and hopefully there'll be a resurgence. You see tube amps coming back, you see vinyl coming back, and hopefully, the process of recording music sort of with like living, breathing musicians who, maybe are all in the room together, that'll, still survive. But Rick was asked that question recently, and his take on it is that it's really it's really changing and it's sort of hurting the overall music business, and so I think that is going on.
Maybe it's also documentaries like this that kind of amplify how important those sounds were. That will have kind of the true artisans going back to doing like microbrew and
exactly,
micro
distill, microbrew, totally.
All this stuff. So maybe it'll be part of that culture.
It's
too.
really true. Yeah, authenticity. It's like things that are authentic. We're starting to appreciate. Like, hey, you know this. Yeah. This was we had it right, you know, before.
Yeah, very cool.
Yeah.
Well, it's been nice chatting to you.
Yeah,
Thanks
you too.
For spending a few minutes with us.
Thanks a lot.